Thank you very much and welcome this morning to the Ordinary Council meeting, the 24th of March, and we're starting this at 9 o'clock. I'll conduct the attendance of the meeting. Around the room we have myself, Councillor Madsen, Councillor Tully, Councillor Doyle, Councillor Fechner, Councillor Milligan, Councillor Kunzman. We have Councillor Ireland who is dialing in from Teams.
Thank you, I'm here.
Wonderful. Just jump in any time you want, Councillor Ireland. I'll go to you, but I will refer to you for each vote as well, just as to ensure. Thank you. So to ensure that Councillor Ireland can attend via Teams, I move that in accordance with section 254K of the Local Government Regulations of 2012 and 8.6.2 of Council's Meeting Procedures Policy, Councillor Sheila Ireland be permitted to participate in the meeting via audio link. I move that. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Fechner. Any questions or discussion? I put that to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And it's unanimous in the room. I'm just checking, do I need I don't need Councillor Ireland's vote on that, do I? Or?
Oh, no, that's fine.
Yes? Councillor Ireland, how do you vote on that?
I'm in agreement.
An agreement. Thank you. We now move on to an acknowledgement of country. Councillor Kunzman, would you like to do the acknowledgement of country?
Ipswich City Council acknowledge and recognise the sovereign and human rights of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and the communities of Ipswich, to self-determination, meaningful engagement with local government and shared governance and decision-making. We commit through the Indigenous Accord to the strengthening of bonds between Council and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities of Ipswich.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kunzman. We'll move into the opening prayer, and I'll do that this morning. Heavenly Father, we seek you to be with us in this meeting today. Assist us to be an example to others, bringing strength and encouragement in whatever we do, and equip us for the ongoing challenges as they arise. Give the guidance to continue to make wise decisions for both the short and long-term benefit of our city and our community, regardless however difficult and unpopular some will be. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
We now move into apologies and leaves of absence. I have an apology from the Deputy Mayor, and I think if you follow her Facebook page, you'll see that her mother passed away recently and her funeral was yesterday. So our deepest condolences to the Deputy Mayor, and she's an apology today. So I ask for a leave of absence for her. You'll move that, Councillor Tully?
I'll move that.
Thank you. A second from Councillor Kunzman. I'll put that to the floor. Those in favour for the leave of absence? It's unanimous in the room. And Councillor Ireland, did you just say aye?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Would that be Councillor Ireland's computer doing that? Oh, it's you. Okay. I'll move on now to 5.1, which is a condolence motion. And I'll be moving a condolence motion for Mrs. Elizabeth Lizzie Jordan. I move that Council express its condolences on behalf of the city to the family of Mrs. Elizabeth Lizzie Jordan. Mrs. Jordan, formerly of Abbey Vale and later at Brassel, was the city's and among the nation's oldest residents when she passed away at the grand old age of 110 earlier this month. I spoke earlier this year in council on Mrs. Jordan when she turned 110. I'd just like to share with you a little story that I had with Mrs. Jordan. Last year at the official opening of the Ipswich show, Mrs. Jordan and I were to give speeches along with local politicians and show society leaders. Before I gave my speech, Mrs. Jordan leaned across to me and said, "I hope your speech will be short." I was not going to disappoint Mrs. Jordan. When I got up to speak, I said, "Welcome to the 148th show in Ipswich and hope everyone has fun," and I promptly sat back down. It's advice I cherish today, and I think probably for all of us in public office, to have shorter, more succinct speeches. In that spirit, in her memory, I pass on the city's condolences to her children, Peter and Valerie, her grandchildren and great-grandchildren and her extended family. Mrs. Jordan loved baking and crafts, and I saw many of her sewing feats over the years, and she was very, very much known for her competitive spirit in the shows. She was very active in her church community as well. She'll be remembered for her love of socialising, especially with her grand and great-grandchildren. She will be dearly missed. I move that. Would anyone else like to make any comments? I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous on the chambers. Councillor Ireland?
Aye.
Thank you very much. I now move on to item 6, tributes, and there are none. 7, presentation of petitions, there are none. 8, presentations and deputations, there are none. And 9, public participation, there are none. We now move on to the matters of public interest, and there are 2 of those. And the first one is on the floods. I'd like to move this matter of public interest on the 2022 flood event. As 2021 wound down and we look forward to 2022, many of us are looking forward to a fresh start. But as predictions for a La Nina weather event were realised in January and through February, and the rain started coming down and down and down, through the rivers, the creeks and the streams started coming up and up. At our last ordinary meeting, which was held on Thursday the 25th of February, we received the first emergency alerts the very next day after that last meeting. And the local disaster management group began straight away with 24-hour operations. The evacuation centre opened the next day, and it was very clear that our city was in for a flood with levels that we'd not seen since 2013, many fearing perhaps 2011. To give you a sense of the volume of water that fell over those few days, rain gauges at Mount Glorious recorded 1.77 metres of rain. Usually you say mils when you measure rain, but you have to say it in metres for this one. And that was in the week around the 27th of February. That's nearly 3 times the rain that fell in 2011, and more rain than 1974. The rain fell and didn't stop. It has been described as a rain bomb, and that's a pretty good description for the volume of rain that constantly fell for days on end. As the rain fell, the rivers came up. Some observed river heights in the city, including 6.83 metres at Rosewood, 16.72 metres at Central Ipswich, and 14.2 metres at Moggill. During the emergency service, Council housed more than 400 people at the evacuation centre. With the help of the community, served over 3,800 meals, distributed around 30,000 sandbags, and received over 1 million hits on the disaster dashboard that we run for Council to give information to residents. I'm very grateful that our city avoided any fatalities during this flood event, and it appears to have avoided any major injuries to residents as well. And I think knowing that there were 22 fatalities for this incident for South East Queensland and Northern New South Wales, it's something that our community can be very proud that we kept each other safe. The resulting inundation yet again caused massive damage and devastation in our community, to many who have now rebuilt their lives at least once in the last decade and now face the prospect of starting again and again. Rapid damage assessments from the Queensland Fire and Rescue Emergency Service indicate at least 890 houses or properties in the city have been impacted by floodwaters, with 450 in the severe to moderate impact category. So far, more than 4,200 tonnes of waste has been deposited in council landfills as a direct result of the flood waste. Each one of these houses, each tonne of waste, is someone's home, someone's business, someone's everything. While we didn't lose people, livelihoods, homes and memories have been coated in mud. After the waters went down, I was extremely proud of the way that our community responded. Neighbours checked in with hot food and a cold beer, and a shoulder to lean on with gloves, mops, shovels and gurneys to clean and dig deep to help. The Australian Defence Force arrived as well, our Green and Blue Angels, bringing heavy machinery and a willingness to help their fellow Australians in their time of need. We are still cleaning up and there is still much to do to recover, and in time a review and a conversation about what we do now and what we've done in what we've done in once in a century floods twice in this century already. I want to place on record my thanks to the council officers and staff who worked tirelessly, literally around the clock, literally 24 hours a day, to manage disaster alerts, organise evacuation centres, the crews who filled sandbags on diverted traffic, the SES who responded and the council staff who volunteered to serve in the evacuation centre. I want to acknowledge our emergency services, the police, the Swiftwater technicians, the QFES staff, ambulance officers and the ADF for your professionalism and expert management and the SES. I also want to acknowledge our elected reps in our community. The state and the federal reps were absolutely brilliant in this, plus the hundreds of state and federal public servants who also deployed in this assistance. It's been a huge team effort and it wouldn't have been possible without all 3 levels of government working together. And I want to thank you again, the Ipswich community and my fellow councillors, for the way in which we've pulled together to make sure that we can get through this challenge. I know that each of our councillors have been door-knocking flood-impacted residents in Goodna, Bundamba, North Baval, Basin Pocket, Barellan Point, Carolee and many other suburbs. I have seen them day after day, having long, hard days, supporting people who are highly traumatised. I remind my colleagues to practice self-care during these times. Council's provided a counselling service for us all and our teams in council to have face-to-face sessions to assist with the trauma that we're all seeing on a daily basis. I had a session with the council last Thursday just to help me unpack what I have seen and what I have heard. Our community are relying on us as councillors to lead during challenging times, and we need to ensure that we are practising self-care so that our judgment and our leadership is not impaired. I want to thank each of the councillors here for their many hours of tireless work during the flood and during the clean-up and the recovery work we are doing now. People won't see the work that you're doing on Facebook, they won't see it in the media because you're hands-on, face-to-face with people who are impacted and traumatised. I want to thank you and recognise the work that you are currently doing 7 days a week to support our residents. Thank you. Finally, I ask that our community be kind to each other. Thousands of people in our community have just been through one of the most extreme circumstances they will endure in their lifetime. They are feeling traumatised, exhausted and overwhelmed. Let's wrap our arms around them. We still have much to do to get back on our feet and conversations to have about what we need to do next, and I'm determined to make sure that our city build back better than before and that we look after everyone who needs a helping hand. I move that there's no need for a seconder for an MPI. I put that forward. All those in favour? I think it's unanimous in the chamber. Councillor Ireland?
Affirmative.
Thank you. The second matter of public interest is on the SEQ City deal. I'm delighted to report to council that our city has secured a significant injection of funding this week with the signing of the $1.8 billion SEQ City deal. I was excited to join Prime Minister Scott Morrison and Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk and my fellow South East Queensland mayors to herald a new era of our governments working together to ensure the future livability and prosperity of Ipswich and South East Queensland. The SEQ City deal is a transformative agreement between 3 levels of government that will reshape our region for the next 20 years. For our city, this means a joint commitment of $10 million to complete the Ipswich to Springfield Central Public Transport Corridor options analysis and business case. This will make the project shovel-ready. The first round of funding in this 20-year deal will deliver a direct boost to Ipswich of $28 million and give our city access to a regional funding pool of $400 million. While this deal has been many years in the making, I'm hopeful it'll be well worth the wait. This week marks the start of 2 decades of investment in our city and our region and a significant boost to jobs, connectivity and economic growth for Ipswich. I move that MPI. I have a vote on the floor. Those in favour, raise your hands. So I'm looking around. There's myself, Councillor Cornsman, Councillor Milligan, Councillor Fechner, Councillor Doyle, Councillor Tully. You're not voting, Councillor Madsen? No. Thank you very much. Councillor Ireland, which way do you vote?
Affirmative.
Thank you. All those against? There are none. Those abstaining? Please mark Councillor Madsen abstain. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to item 11, declarations of interest in the matters on the agenda. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Fechner.
Thanks, Mayor. In accordance with Section 150 EQ of the Local Government Act, I, Councillor Andrew Fechner, inform the meeting that I have a couple of declarable conflicts of interest in the following items. 15.6, entitled the Ipswich Central Redevelopment Committee's report, and the late report item 16.7, entitled Provision of Detailed Design Services for the Commonwealth Hotel Extension. The nature of this interest is that I have business interests in Bar Heisenberg Proprietary Limited and A1A Events Proprietary Limited, both located in the top of town in Ipswich. I plan on dealing with my conflict by leaving the room while the matter is discussed and voted on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fechner. Are there any other declarations? Thank you, Councillor Madsen.
In accordance with Section 150 EQ of the Local Government Act 2009, I, Councillor Jacob Madsen, inform the meeting that I have a declarable conflict of interest in item 15.6, titled Ipswich Central Redevelopment Committee's report, And 16.7 late report item titled Provision of Detailed Design Services for the Commonwealth Hotel Extension. The nature of the declarable conflict of interest is I'm on the executive of the Ipswich Trades Hall and Labour Day Committee, and all of those activities are immediately adjacent to our building, the Ipswich Trades Hall. As a result of that, I will leave the meeting room while the matter is discussed and voted on.
Thank you very much, Councillor Masden. Thank you both for disclosing that. Any other declarations of interest? Councillor Ireland, just checking in.
No, I have no conflicts.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Move on to item 12, which is the confirmation of the minutes, and we have a few sets here. One is 2.1, the confirmation of the minutes of the ordinary meeting for the 24th of February 2022, and I'll move those. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman. Any questions or discussion on those minutes? I think Councillor, no, I think it's the next one, Councillor Ireland, for you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And any discussion on these minutes? In that case, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the chamber. Councillor Ireland, how do you vote? Affirmative. Thank you very much. We move on to item 12.2, which is the confirmation of the special meeting held on the 10th of March. And I know, Councillor Ireland, I think you wish to question something, so I'll move that. And do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Doyle. Now, I believe, Councillor, you called me this morning. You have a question on one of the items and that you'd like to move to closed session, was my understanding?
Yes, well, it was from the special meeting, so yes, please.
Thank you. I know that you're working from home, so I'll do that for you if that's okay.
Just a point of order. Is this for the adoption of those minutes?
My understanding from Councillor, I wanted to clarify something from those minutes, is my understanding.
Well, I'm not sure that under the local government regulation you can close the meeting for that purpose.
Right, okay.
That if it's for the accuracy of the minutes, and that's basically what that motion is, that needs to be done in open session.
Okay. I'll just seek advice from the acting CEO.
Through you, Mayor, I think the nature of Councillor Ireland's inquiry, as Councillor Tully, is not correct in the minutes. It's an actual question about interpretation or meaning in a sentence or an aspect of the recommendation. So to give clarification to that is probably safer if we went into close just for that short period of time. Not changing the minutes as I understand it, it's just wanting clarification on part of the resolution.
I'll just check, Councillor, are you seeking clarification or you question?
Yes, I just need to understand what one of the recommendations actually means.
So I'll and I think, Councillor Tully, if it is not commercial in confidence, then I think we disclose what it is when we come out of open session, when we come back to open session. So
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you. I'll move into closed session. So, Councillor, since I've got the script in front of me, I'll do that for you. Is that okay, or would you like to do that yourself?
No, I'm following the screen, but go ahead. You do it for me.
I move that in accordance with section 254J3. Just looking here. G, negotiations relating to a commercial matter involving the local government for which a public discussion will be likely to prejudice the interests of the local government. Of the Local Government Regulation 2012, the meeting moved into closed session to discuss item, I think it was 16.3 of that special meeting. Put that to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand to go into closed. Oh. Councillor Ireland's has asked to go into closed session to clarify a point in item 16.3 of the minutes. Sorry, Councillor, I don't know if you can see here, but no one's putting their hand up.
Okay. Oh, that's all right.
Okay.
I'm happy to ask a question then.
Okay, we don't go to closed session. Okay, so you would like to ask your question then, Councillor Ireland, about the minutes?
Yes, if I can,
Yep,
please.
go
Just
for it.
for clarification.
Yep.
Okay. On 16.3, which is the Nicholas Street precinct, approval for agreement for lease for the Commonwealth Hotel. Recommendation C, I just want to know if we dispose of council's interest, what does that actually leave us with?
So I think Mr. Madigan, would you like to, who would be the best person? So we're looking at item 6.3 of the special council meeting, which is the Nicholas Street Precinct approval and agreement for lease for the Commonwealth Hotel. Recommendation C. Okay, so Councillor, I'm just hearing, I'm getting, I think, did you wish to say something, Councillor Tully?
Yeah, I'm concerned that under the Act, we have a motion before us to adopt the minutes of the meeting as essentially a true and correct record of that. We can't change the wording unless it's inaccurate.
Okay.
And it seems as though the discussion is about issues arising from the minutes rather than purely on the accuracy of the minutes.
So, Councillor, I'm getting a lot of nods in the... Yes, Councillor Manson?
Just before we go on too much further, if the discussion goes beyond the minutes, I'm not comfortable in being here. I don't have a conflict with the minutes, but if the discussion pertains to something in those minutes, perhaps I do.
Okay.
So I'm seeking guidance from the chamber what
Yeah,
I'm
I
meant to do
echo
in this
Councillor
scenario.
Okay, in that case,
sentiment.
if I just for good order of this meeting, I take the advice from my colleagues here, and I thank you very much. I know, Councillor, what I'll decide to do is the fact that since I don't think you're questioning the minutes, we will proceed without that question, and you can put in an information request about that, what that particular sentence means. I'm getting a nod from the acting CEO. So to keep good meeting order, we'll proceed along that way. So I move that the confirmation of the minutes for the special meeting held on the 10th of March 2022 be confirmed. It's been seconded by Councillor Doyle. Are there any other questions as to the minutes of the meeting? No, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. It's unanimous in the room. Councillor Ireland, how do you vote?
I'll abstain, please.
Okay, and the Councillor Ireland is abstaining. Thank you. I now move on to item 13, which is the mayoral minute, which I gave notice of at the last meeting, which is item 13.1, the Ipswich 2032 Summit, and I've provided that for the meeting. So I recommend that Council deliver an Ipswich 2032 Summit to engage with the Ipswich community to better understand its priorities ahead of the 2032 Olympic and Paralympic Games, and that Council resolve to A, develop a draft Ipswich 2032 Summit event plan, agenda and format, with a focus on engaging with and seeking input from the Ipswich community for the consideration and endorsement of the July 2022 Ordinary Council meeting. B, host an Ipswich 2032 Summit no later than September 22, with appropriate venue capacity to ensure significant community involvement in the event. And C, report back to an Ordinary Council meeting by no later than December 2022, outlining the outcomes of the Ipswich 2032 Summit and initial plans for Council's legacy development in the preparation for the 2032 Games. I open this up for discussion and debate. There being no discussion or debate, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the chamber. Councillor Ireland, how do you vote?
Affirmative.
Thank you. It's carried. We move on to item 14, business outstanding, including conduct matters and matters lying on the table to be dealt with. And there are none. So item 15, which is the reception consideration of the committee reports. And the very first one is the Growth and Infrastructure Waste Committee. And I've got a recommendation here that, I'll speak to you as my deputy as well, that I think we're looking at moving all items, but item 2, is that correct, Councillor Tully?
Yes, just let me double check.
Or do you wish to just discuss it?
I think we can receive and note those other items, and in relation to the media policy that we recommend the adoption of it to comprise it in one motion.
So, okay, thank you very much. So I'll move items 1 through to 6 from the GIW be approved. Did you wish to second that, Councillor Tully? Thank you. I now open it up for discussion or questions.
Sorry, just to clarify, it's what 1 to 6 that we receive and note, is that correct? And then item 2 we adopt. because that's only a recommendation to this council.
Yes,
rather
okay. Thank you very much for clarifying. I'll just re-say that. My apologies. So I note that the Growth, Infrastructure and Waste Committee report of 2022 on the 10th of March be noted with the exception of item 2 titled Meeting the Corporate Communications Policy, which is to be adopted.
Correct.
So I move that. Are you
Yeah,
happy
I'll
to second that?
second
Thank you very much. Any discussion or questions on that?
Yeah, I'd like to speak in relation to item 2. This is the media and corporate communications policy, which has been around for a while and has had a lot of discussion. But I do note what you've said previously, Mayor, that even with the adoption today, that this is a fluid document and can be reviewed on an ongoing basis. I don't even think we have to wait 6 or 12 months, that issues will no doubt arise because it's a rather complex document, because it covers the media policy affecting the mayor, chairpersons, councillors and the staff who have to implement that policy as well. And I think what it does is indicates a clear commitment to the role that particularly the divisional councillors play to get the information out to the 4 divisions in our overall community, and the role that committee chairs can play as part of that process as well. It's had a lot of thought, and it's a policy which encompasses a wide range of issues, but I think it would be much better for our Ipswich community. And I do note something that I believe is a first for any council in Queensland, and this follows a matter which got some prominence recently with the OIA of a mayor who made comments, and it was suggested that perhaps before he made any comments about things he needed to speak to state officials and whatever. And our policy, as I say, under proposed policy under Section 6 scope, protects the right of councillors to raise issues in good faith. It says nothing in the policy shall be interpreted as affecting the right of individual councillors to raise or comment on issues of public importance or significance to them, and to speak about such matters as elected representatives of the local community or in some other capacity, which many of us do have an alternative capacity. And I think this puts on the public record the rights of elected members. We would all be aware of the number of people who raise a variety of issues with us, which won't be roads, rates and rubbish, and might not even fit neatly with the Local Government Act. But as elected members, they expect us to have our say and to do it in good faith. And as I've said, I believe this is a first in Queensland to indicate that councillors do have that proper role. And what amazes me in relation to this policy is the story in the Ipswich Tribune yesterday. That it is headed on page 1, accountability removed. Now, there is no accountability which has been removed in this matter, but 2 paragraphs have been referenced that the previous wording of the policy had the following. 1, that this policy, the old policy, acknowledges that any information which has been made public through official channels, including committee papers and briefings, is open to media scrutiny. Now, I would think any council of Local Government 101, if not before they were elected, it would be obvious to anyone that anything that happens in the public domain is open to media scrutiny. One thing I say is that when you write council policies, you don't have a lot of fluff in there, you don't have self-serving material, and there's no point in stating the absolute obvious. And I'm very disappointed in the Boona journalist who wrote this, because it concentrates nothing at all. There is nothing in this story that relates to the rights of councillors being expanded in this policy to communicate with their communities. It touches on that issue, and another reference that as a matter of being removed, as a matter of transparency, council should be in a position to explain all publicly available background commentary decisions or other publicly available material to the community, including through council's media channels or third-party media organisations, which is exactly what the policy does. It achieves that exact situation. I am just amazed, and I can't imagine at what time of the day or perhaps night that this story was written, but it is a complete absence of the key and the good points in this policy, and I'm extremely disappointed that this sort of material is being written, because it puts a colouring on it, suggesting that we're overturning what a previous administration did. Well, we've got the right to do that. Is it being said that an administrator who made decisions that this council for the next 50 years can't change any of those decisions? I'm really disappointed in that, and I would hope that there could be a follow-up story which paints the truth of the benefits of the new proposed policy.
Thank you very much, Councillor Tully. Anyone else who'd like to speak? Thank you, Councillor Tully, for making the clarification. The principle and if you see the intent of the new document, you will see that whilst in the previous policy, all councillors could put their views forward and could speak to the media, this one actually provides more support. So there are more official spokespeople, because in the previous one it was just myself and the CEO. To me, every single person in this chamber, every elected rep here, has gone through the toughest job interview ever, going through a political campaign, bringing in a new council. They should have every right to speak to the media and communicate with the public. Either if it's their personal view, they say that, or if it's the council view, they say that. It's our job to communicate quite clearly with our community. So, yes, I think maybe the intent of the policy was missed in that article. Any other comments? In that case, I put that to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous around the room. Councillor Ireland, how do you vote on 15.1?
Affirmative.
Thank you.
Affirmative.
It's carried. We go to 15.2, which is the Governance and Transparency Committee, and I'll move to the chair of that to see if he'd like to move that and speak to it.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to move it, but first I'd like to check with Councillor Tully. Was it the APRA matter that you wanted more information on?
Yes, and I think from the relevant officer that would be suitable.
Mayor, if we could call on the relevant officer.
For item 5?
Yes. I don't anticipate that we'll be breaking up the recommendation as is in our pack this morning.
Okay. So I call on the relevant council officer for the Government Transparency Committee, item 5, which is procurement, One Music Australia licence for the use of music for councils. May I just clarify, Councillor, is it a procurement matter or is it to the substance of what the licence itself? Just so the council can...
Yeah, it's more the substance of the licence. And
okay, so not...
Yeah, but they're probably twin issues.
Okay, Mr Stewart's coming forward, thank you.
Morning, Don Stewart, Manager Community and Cultural Services.
Councillor Tully.
Thank you. I just need to clarify this. I've had dealings with APRA over the years. I think it's an organisation that started in about 1930 or 1932 in Australia. I just wanted to clarify with this. Did they, it's more or less a series of questions, but you can just answer them generally. Did they come to us with this proposal? Have we ground truthed the amount of the dollars involved in this, and have we confirmed that? Is that based on screens or speakers, or I just want to just get a feel of how this came about, and I guess what our obligations are, and can we challenge it if they've provided the amount we need to pay over this period of time? Can we challenge that, and have we verified that the amount is correct in accordance with their policies?
Sure. Numerous points there, Councillor, so I'll do my best to respond to each one of those. The APRA licence was something that was initiated back in this particular format, I should say, back in around about 2018, 2019, where it was identified that council, and a number of councils, I should say, probably weren't, and in all likelihood were not, applying the copyright applications that we should be for whenever we're playing public music, performance or recorded music. This particular licence provides an overarching cover for council. We have a number of facilities and venues within councils, libraries, performing arts theatre, public spaces, music on hold, where we are required to in fact pay copyright on a number of those songs or music pieces. It was identified that we weren't. This particular licence covers council as a whole for 95% of our undertakings, where that is excluded when we have a major event where we are responsible. And if I could use the example of probably Carol's in the previous years, that would have required a separate licensing application. This gives us coverage for everything in the Civic Centre, for argument's sakes, everything at Toolmar Place, and I should say most publicly delivered events and, in our LGA, under council jurisdiction and management.
And did they provide the figure to us based on our operations and the size of the council?
There was they did undertake a level of review across Queensland, I should say Australia, because it applies across all jurisdictions, where they identified that councils, there are a number of different classifications under the APRA licensing. Councils were given a special or an individual classification, and their formula was worked out based on, I guess, review of all of those particular jurisdictions. Population was the easiest way in which to identify how to charge. Our annual fees prior to that, if we were to adopt the old way of doing it, we would have been well in excess what has been determined this time round for us to pay on an annual basis.
No, that's fine. That's all the questions I have, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other questions of Mr. Stewart? No, thank you very much, Mr. Stewart. Appreciate that. I'll go back to the mover, how we'd like to conduct the rest of this.
I'm happy to proceed with adopting the recommendations from the committee. I believe Councillor Tully is. Yeah, that's,
Okay.
yeah, okay.
So we have a mover. Do we have a seconder for the motion? Thank you, Councillor Doyle. If anyone would like to speak to this motion, this recommendation?
Does the chair of the committee wish to speak?
Did you wish to provide?
I'd just give a brief overview that,
Thank you.
We deliberated on these last week and came to the recommendations before us. As usual, a couple of procurement matters, a couple of lease matters. And yeah, I'd stand by the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Madsen. Any other discussion? Yes, Councillor Tully?
Yeah, Mayor, I'll just speak in relation to item 5, which I'll be supporting the recommendation, but it raises the issue, and this can come as a big surprise to lots of businesses around Australia, that APRA, certainly in the past, has used people to go to places like nightclubs and count the number of television sets and speakers and so on. And I'm certainly aware of one place in Ipswich where that occurred, and they got a very hefty bill some years ago. But even a radio playing in the reception room of a doctor comes within the ambit of the requirement to be licensed. I think this is probably, from what we've heard today, and I assume at the committee, this regularises our position and the position presumably of lots of councils in Queensland. But it's a timely reminder to businesses. How many places do you go to, small businesses where they've got a radio playing or something like that? They need to be aware that these licence fees are mandatory, and they can be quite significant. And it just shows how these sorts of things can easily, even in a big organisation, become overlooked. But APRA is very, very powerful. I don't think anyone's successfully challenged their legal powers to impose these licence fees. And it's for a good purpose, because the originators of the music or the works are entitled to be fairly recompensed. And this is another example of things that creep up on councils with a fairly significant amount of money, which does affect our budget, and in one sense comes out of the blue.
Thank you very much, Councillor Tully. Any other discussion? I'll put item 15.2 to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the chamber. Councillor Ireland, how do you vote?
Affirmative.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ireland. I'll now move on to item 15.3, which is the Community, Culture, Arts and Sports Committee, and I'll hand over to the Chair there to see if you'd like to move it and speak to the motion.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'd like to move the recommendation as it stands, that Council adopt the recommendations of the Community, Culture, Arts and Sports Committee.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman. Would anyone like to speak to it?
Yep, just briefly, Mayor, I'd like to just bring to the committee's attention that we noted a couple of really important programs that Council will be rolling out First of all was the Ipswich Resilient Leadership and Mentoring Program, which comes at a time where we know that the community is struggling, and we've partnered with the state government who have funded this in its entirety to build the resilience of our community groups. So great timing and a great investment in our community. Secondly, we noted the program for the Ipswich Young Leaders Academy, and since our committee meeting, that Young Leaders Academy has convened for the first time in an online webinar, and we had 50 young people attend. So there's already some really great interest around that, and a really wonderful program. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Fenner. Any other discussion on it? No, I agree with you, Councillor Fickner. Both really great programs. Thank you for your leadership on that. I do note that the Resilient Leaders Mentoring Program is jointly funded by the Australian and Queensland governments under the disaster recovery funding arrangements, which is very, very thankful for both those levels of government supporting that. I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the chamber. Councillor Ireland, how do you vote?
Affirmative.
Thank you very much. Now moving to item 15.4, the Economic and Industry Development Committee. As the Deputy Mayor is an apology, Councillor Madsen, would you like to move that? And so, thank you very much. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Fickner. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Madsen?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. At the Economic and Industry Development Committee a fortnight ago, we had an economic update which outlined some good things that are happening in the city. The Small Business Resilience and Growth Funding Program, which I'd encourage everyone to take a look at. It's pretty good. And lastly, we had event sponsorship for the Gathering 2022. Just wanted to briefly state, as a descendant of some early Scottish diaspora that moved here to Ipswich, I think it's good to see that broad tapestry of culture continue to be celebrated. For many centuries, that culture was sought to be extinguished by the royal family. So I'm very proud to see that the culture remains and will remain. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Madsen. My husband has strong Scottish heritage as well. He's a lowlander, not a highlander, but yes. Thank you. Any other discussion on 15.4? No? I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the room. Councillor Ireland, how do you vote?
Affirmative.
Thank you very much. Go to item 15.5, which is the Environment Sustainability Committee. I hand over to the chair of that committee. Councillor Millian, would you like to move that?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I'd like to move that the minutes of the previous Environment Sustainability Committee meeting be adopted.
Thank you.
There were no new items on the agenda.
Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. Councillor Millian, would you wish to speak to that motion now?
No, thank you, Mayor. There were no new items on the agenda.
Thank you. Wonderful. Any other discussion? I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the chamber. Councillor Ireland, how do you vote?
Agree.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Mazza. Thank you, Councillor Fickner. Thank you. We're now on to item 15.6, which is the Ipswich Central Redevelopment Committee. And I note that there were 6 items in that, and I do note that items 4, 5 and 6 of this committee were resolved at the special council meeting on the 10th of March, which has now, those minutes have been adopted. So we'll just be looking, I think, at items 1 to 3. Would that be correct?
Yes, that's correct, Mayor.
Okay. I'll hand over to you, the chair of that committee, Councillor Dawes, to move that.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I move that Council adopt the recommendations from the Ipswich Central Redevelopment Committee, reports 1 through to 3.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Conswood. Would you like to speak to that report, Councillor Doyle?
No.
Thank you. I think it's probably self-explanatory. No discussion. Is there any discussion? I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the room. Councillor Ireland, how do you vote?
I'll abstain, thank you.
You'll abstain. Thank you very much. The matter is carried. We'll wait for Councillor Madsen and Councillor Fitch to come back. Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to item 16.1, which is the CEO Organisational Performance Report for February 2022. I have one question on this, Acting CEO, if I may ask. Page 86, we talk about the Shape Your Ipswich, which is on the current consultation matters. Are there any other items coming up on Shape Your Ipswich, or there is none at the moment? Normally there's a table there outlining upcoming matters.
Through to you, Mayor, they're the only ones that I know of at the present time. Okay. There may be some in the pipeline from the various departments, and obviously as they progress to a more substantive stage, they'll be announced and circulated.
Thank you, Acting CEO. I move that the CEO's Organisational Performance Report for February 2022 be received and contents noted. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Fechner. I'll open it up for discussion. I think I'll just discuss on the one current significant matters in talking about the flood response. Thank you, Acting CEO, for stepping up in that time of disaster. And talking about the pop-ups, I also note, apart from the community recovery hubs at Goodna and Ipswich, we had the pop-up at Rosewood last week, and I think today at Carroll Shopping Centre as well. So just if you have any issues or concerns about the flood, please contact Council and we will assist along there. And I think Councillor Cosby wish to speak to that as well.
Yes, Mayor, there's a pop-up at Marburg tomorrow.
Wonderful.
10 to 2.
Whereabouts? At the Green Shed or whereabouts?
Green Shed.
Thank you. I also comment on the workplace health and safety figures to continue seeing, especially the lost time injury frequency rate, continue lower, and that our average is less than the state is commendable to the entire organisation. It's not just up to one person, it's up to all of us. Thank you. I don't have any other points I'd wish to discuss. Does anyone else have anything else they'd like to discuss from this report? I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's carried. It's unanimous in the chamber. Councillor Ireland, how do you vote?
Affirmative.
Thank you. It's carried. I think the next matter is going to be quite a substantial matter, so I'll call for an adjournment for half an hour. It's now, I'll call an adjournment till 10:20 a.m. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the room. Councillor Ireland?
Affirmative.
Thank you. So we'll reconvene at 10:20. Thank you. Thank you. We're live. Thank you very much. Welcome back to the Ordinary Council meeting of the 24th of March 2022. We've come back from an adjournment and we're up to item 16.2, which is the development application recommendation of wood mulching industries enclosed compost manufacturing and biogas facility at Swanbank. Does anyone have any questions of the relevant council officers on this matter? We do. May I ask for the relevant council officer to attend the lectern, please?
Good morning, Mayor and Councillors. Anthony Bowles, Acting Development Planning Manager.
I think Councillor Doyle, you had your hand up first. Would you like to ask the first question?
Thank you, Mayor. Apologies, I'm just looking for my notes.
Take all the time you need.
Thank you, Mr. Bowles. I note the report, I guess, speaks to generally compliance and adherence to the conditions of the relevant approval, and that largely it's reliant on the operator putting in place the right measures. We know from other operators that it's not always the case, and we also know it's very difficult and expensive to police and monitor. Just wondering, what assurances do we have that we will be able to monitor compliance matters adequately to ensure no negative impact on residents?
Yep. One of the major differences with this proposal to external outdoor composting, particularly the pasteurisation outdoors, is that the facility is enclosed with a structure that has automatic closing doors, as well as biofilters where the odours are extracted. So one of the major benefits of this proposal is there is a physical restraint on the movement of air that prevents a lot of the odours from moving to residential areas. So comparing it to an open air composting isn't really fair, because it's got this physical constraint that limits the way the air can go, and also provides opportunities for monitoring where the air leaves the facility. So the biofilters underneath the aeration beds are able to be sampled for odour. So there's an Australian standard that we will be requiring, well, DES will require the odour monitoring to be carried out against, and they can take samples from the biofilters in the facility and carry out a measurement to determine how much odour there is and where it compares to the Australian standards for the level of feedstock that they've got. So there are other components as well. So there are feedstock management protocols, which limits certain feedstock that is particularly odorous, very high and high standards, that they're not allowed until the biogas facility is in place. So the capture of those can be carried out in the biogas facility as well, which is another physical mechanism to improve the ability to monitor and capture those odours. So the main difference is that there are physical structures and things and capture mechanisms to prevent a lot of the bad odours from leaving the site, which is different to other operators where it is physically dumped on the ground and mixed on the ground, where there is no capability of a structure to retain some of those odours. So operational measures will be important. So carrying out the monitoring as per the DES conditions, as well as carrying out feedstock monitoring as per the feedstock management plan. But certainly this has a major benefit in that there is physical construction occurring, which will limit the ability of the odour to leave the site.
So just to clarify, the monitoring the feedstock size, height, that falls within council's?
Not quite, no. So the feedstock monitoring is less about the quantities and more about quantities of individual components. So all the components of the feedstock are broken down. So the worst sort of things are animal fats and things of that nature. whereas the least odorous feedstock are just plain green material, like lawn clippings and the likes. So the feedstock management plan has a strategy for each of those different feedstocks and limitations on those components. The important part is what parts of those feedstock can be used just in the facility itself, or require the biogas facility, which is a much better tool at containing those odours, because it's a fully contained system.
Okay. And is there a comparable facility like this elsewhere in southeast Queensland? And if so, do we know if there's any complaints coming from residents? I note, I think it's at 1.2 kilometres from the nearest, but as we know from our residents within Collingwood Park, Riverview, Bundamba, and obviously Ripley, the
Yes.
odours do travel.
Yes, so there are comparable facilities in southeast Queensland. I believe there's one in Yamanto. They are also close to residential communities. So as much as it does rely on operational measures to be completely emitting the odours, there are a lot of physical constraints at this type of facility that prevent a lot of those odours from leaving the site. And fortunately, there are test cases of this working effectively in other areas in southeast Queensland. So this particular model isn't new, and it isn't something that is untested. So there's some benefit of experience there.
Mr. Bowles, I'm looking at page 138 of the council paper, which is on the risk management implications.
Okay. Apologies, I'll just have to get that up on my
That's
report.
okay. Yep. Take your time.
Okay, yep.
I expected to see there some discussion of risk on the actual project itself, but instead it was just discussing what happens if council don't approve it as a risk and nothing else. Are you able to speak about the risk of the facility itself?
Yeah, just to explain, what we've included there is information about the risk of making or not making the decision as per the recommendation. So a lot of the risk is detailed in, I suppose, the conditions and management strategies either enforced by a council or Department of Environment and Science. I suppose the main risks are related to the operation of the use. So if the use is carried out without the conditions being complied with, there would be a risk of odours and things like that. We have the benefit of much better understanding now of how to enforce these sorts of conditions. What sort of conditions are effective in managing behaviours, and what sorts of conditions are more enforceable. And what we found, and what you might notice if you read some of the DES conditions, is that we need to be very specific, and we need to have quite a lot of, I suppose, layers in the way that those risks can be managed. So the air quality risk assessment is managed through continual monitoring. So the biofilters can be tested. They're required to provide samples every 6 months, 3 months for operation, from the startup of operation, and at request when there's complaints. So when complaints are received, there is to be an investigation by the operator and a report provided to the Department of Environment and Science. So the level of compliance activity that's required by the applicant to manage those risks when a complaint has been lodged, or if a complaint is lodged, as well as monitoring periodically, is significantly more advanced than what we have in other uses. So it's a combination, the management of the risk is a combination of active compliance through the complaint-based system, or through inquiries via DES, but as well as regularised monitoring through the biofilter system, specifically for odour anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Bowles. I noted that this application will expect the biogas facility handle approximately 50 to 100,000 tonnes a year of green waste. Whereas at the moment, the site has composting, is already accepting the waste. Are they also accepting waste that's the more odorous stuff, like the animal fats and things like that? Does that site currently do that now?
I can't say for a fact. I might just yes, they are. Yep, Mike can answer that. Thank you.
So what are the annual quantities they're taking in now to be compared with what they believe they'll be doing in the future?
I don't have those specific details. I think that I can answer some of that question with the DES conditions in the feedstock monitoring. So if you might just take me a little bit to find those specific points.
Mayor, if I may, excuse me, just wanting to correct a statement by Mr. Bowles. He mistakenly said Yamanto as a place where another facility is operating. It would be Yatala.
That's
So-
right. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you. I was going to ask that after the meeting came.
That is what I meant. Thank you.
I have no complaints from you, Manto.
I don't believe I have that detail readily available, I'm afraid. I've got the odour rating for those
I
materials.
guess what I'm looking at is that they're currently already doing something, and they're looking at doing something that is obviously going to dramatically improve what's currently happening. I guess I'm just looking at what the quantity difference would be. And I know it's a substantial investment by this business as well.
That's right. I might not be able to answer directly the quantities of both before and after those materials, but I will say that the management of the odours from those materials will be significantly improved by this operation, particularly with the biogas facility, which is fully enclosed digestion, and that a lot of that energy that is created from that digestion is something that can be used on the site or elsewhere, so it's also a renewable energy source. So the impact of those particularly bad odours will be captured and managed a lot better through this operation. Unfortunately, I can't give you the volumes. A lot of those volumes are also market-driven demand, so the volumes can escalate or de-escalate a lot depending on the actual feedstock supplies. And a good example would be when we have a particularly wet season. Obviously, the availability of green feedstock increases because there's more vegetation.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. Obviously, being enclosed is what we've been driving at for our community. I know on page 133 that talked about the fact that how it's noted that the effectiveness of the level of reduction in environmental emissions from the proposed indoor composting facility and the proposed biogas facility as compared to the current operations, it does go on to say that it's highly dependent upon operational measures employed at the site. How are we going to monitor that, or who does that to make sure that those odours of, the whole intent of this investment and to do this is to reduce and remove odours?
Yeah, a lot of the monitoring and the management of those operational measures will be carried out by DES, and they're in accordance with the conditions of the referral agent or the environmental authority, which is in attachment. I think it's attachment. Let me just see for you. Attachment 5. Yes. So if you look through the page, I would say page 17 for noise, and specifically page 13 onwards for air, you can see the air release limits from the point sources, which is the flares and the biofilters and the stacks, and you can see the associated requirements for monitoring timeframes, as well as the standard that's required. So it's quite specific. This isn't something we're able to do with an outdoor composting facility, so there's no ability to have a odour monitor collecting air from the material itself and obtain a sample and send it to a lab and compare it to an Australian standard. You have to carry out a much more, I suppose, niche monitoring methodology, either through a device called an e-nose or through a specific expert in odour monitoring. This capability to take a sample and carry out an assessment against the Australian standard gives DES much more capability in monitoring the impacts of the odour. So when we say management approach, there's two ways to that. On one hand, we need the operator carrying it out effectively, but we also need a method to determine if they haven't. That isn't anecdotal or based on meteorology, for example. So by having that capability to test a point source massively improves the compliance framework that we've got, which in turn influences the way that the operation will occur, because they know that there is an ability to say, well, that odor, you don't know that odor came from here, you know, it could have come from over there or something like that. That ability gets taken away because we have these point source collection points.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. May I ask you, when it came to community consultation, what was WMI's approach and what were the outcomes of that?
Yep, so through the community consultation process, there was two components. There was the formal public notification required under the Planning Act. That was carried out as required. We received one submission on the proposal. It was against the proposal, citing the concerns you would expect about a compost manufacturer, being odour, noise, dust and things like that. WMI carried out a non-statutory public notification period as well, so process as well. So they did a letterbox drop to the community nearby and provide some web collateral and things like that, explaining what the proposal was for, how it was different to what currently exists, and noting that there was an application currently under assessment. So that was, I suppose, extracurricular activity there, which is, I think, was helpful. It certainly, from my reading of the material, wasn't trying to detract or displace any commentary about that. So certainly more than the normal amount of public awareness was created by the applicant. And receiving one submission, I personally found to be quite surprising, but I suppose that gives some indication of the community's concern regarding this proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Bowles. Does anyone have any other questions of Mr. Bowles? Yes, Councillor.
Mayor, may I speak?
Yes, Councillor Ireland, please do.
Bowles, I'm just checking that we're only doing the bio waste activity, and we're not doing any of the MCUs at the end of the report. We're just doing the one thing, aren't we? On your report, at the end of it, you've listed that you're looking at MCUs.
Okay, so we do have an MCU for the compost manufacturer. I think you might be referring to some of the other, I'll just get to that point of the report, because there is a section there about the future development of the surrounding area. So
yeah, that's it. I'm just making sure we're just doing the one thing today.
Yes, so that's probably worth a bit of a mention. So that the current proposal is for the compost manufacturer and the biogas facility. There is a growing industrial area in this locality, so there are some existing approvals nearby. So we have a concrete batching plant as well as a service centre. It is anticipated there will be further industrial areas, which is roughly in accordance with the planning scheme zoning for that area. A lot of them rely on the road network that this use will construct and the future road network that will come out from this. But and that also requires an overarching planning strategy to determine the impacts or the potential road impacts from those future uses. So we've made mention of that because there is to be a broader precinct planning activity occurring in that locality.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think Councillor Tully, you had a question?
Yeah, I'm right in saying that the current approval expires in 2025, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. Was any consideration giving putting a time limit on this approval?
I believe that the restricting this time limit, placing a time limit on this approval would be, I think, really restrictive on the financial capability of the use. And really what we're aiming to achieve here is limit the impacts of the use so that the reason that the original time limit was imposed isn't necessarily there anymore. So that time limit deals with the fact that there's an encroaching residential community, and this basically, these changes to the use mitigate the impacts of the use so that that time limit wouldn't really be reasonable to put on there anymore because of the capture of the odours and things like that. So no, there wasn't consideration of a time limit on this particular proposal.
Any other questions? No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Bowles. The recommendation before us is that council approve the DA, being the material change of use for the waste facility and major utility, and propose lot 1 and reconfiguring lot 1 into 2 lots with associated easement, etc., as per the report. I'll move that. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Fechner. Thank you. I'll move it open for discussion.
Mayor, I would just like to comment that it's a good improvement on what we've had out in the area for waste and composting, and I look forward to seeing some big changes in the air quality.
Thank you, Councillor Ireland. Yes, Councillor Fechner.
Through you, Mayor, and I echo the sentiments of Councillor Ireland with regards to the improvements. I think it is a really important story to tell as to where WMI are now and where they're looking to go to in the future. If we look at a press release from the Department of Environment and Science dated the 19th of March 2021, and this comes with the caveat that that there was the potential for this infringement notice to be challenged by WMI, but they were issued with a $13,000 fine because of the odour nuisance to the suburb of Redbank Plains. And it speaks more specifically about the difficulties around managing the odour nuisance and gives a couple of practical examples how the Odour Abatement Task Force continues to deal with these ongoing issues. So if we think to early last year, the smell was so bad, there were entire suburbs impacted. There continues to be impact to our communities. But if we look to the proficiency and the technical detail of the application in front of us, there has been a lot of consideration that has gone into developing something that will produce a good outcome for our community. And I can't say whether this would actually have happened if our council hadn't taken such a huge stand against the waste industry and demanded better for our constituents. It seems that WMI in this instance have given serious consideration to our waste directive, serious consideration to the impact they're having on our community, and they're looking to develop, to implement great technology, who are prepared to or will have to face these strict conditions that are being imposed on them, not only by the local government, but by the Department of Environment and Science. Now, we all know that there are lots of members in our community that are very sceptical about the Department of Environment and Science and how effective they have been for our city for the longest time. But I think we can find comfort in this application that's in front of us today, and I speak in favour of it because it looks to the future. It looks to implement new technology, and it's significant investment on behalf of WMI, and if well executed, we can see improvements for the broader community, and they should be commended for undertaking this process and working closely with Ipswich City Council and the Department of Environment and Science. And it must be noted that only in recent history, as early as the last 12 months, Council has established a really wonderful working relationship with the Department of Environment and Science. And we did that because our community asked us to. So we have a direct line, we have great relationships forming there, and our residents are being heard, and we're a part of the broader compliance conversation for our city and what it means for our local government area to get these businesses to a point of compliance where they're not negatively impacting our residents. So I thank the council officers for continuing to work closely with the Department of Environment and Science, carefully considering this application and what it means, and getting their head around this new technology and understanding what the state of play is in southeast Queensland. There was a mention of the Phoenix facility, which a few councillors around the table have actually been to that facility and seen the positive impact that that's had on the community surrounding that at Yatala. So again, I just restate my position that I speak in favour of this for our community, for better environmental outcomes for everyone.
Well said, Councillor Fechner. Any other comments? Yes, Councillor Madsen.
I'd just like to, I think it's always key to reiterate the points on matters like this. It's an improvement on the status quo. The status quo has been affecting people in that area for, 20, 30 years at this point. It has a lot of promise to rapidly improve the problem when these works could occur, should the council approve it today. I just want to touch on the concern that would definitely be there in the community. From a technical perspective, you can see that it is a better piece of technology, but a lot of people, including myself, aren't going to believe it until it happens. You can tell me that it's going to solve the problem, but until the problem's solved, I don't believe in the technology. I do believe in experts in general, and I'm not trying to be negative, but it's one thing to say something is going to work, and it's another to see it work in practice. I do think the technology at this site is actually a bit better than the facility in Yatala. So I'm very supportive of what's before us today as a recommendation. And I look forward to hopefully seeing that promised improvement.
Yeah, Councillor Mads, you want this to pass the sniff test?
No, the pub test is always.
Pub test. Thank you. I concur. We know that our two biggest composters are now moving to Investled. We heard from Newgrow early, I think a couple of months ago, and now WMI. So it's a huge change. We've certainly, I think, community and council have really made some changes, and the market is responding to that, but also with the work that DES, are doing in that compliance activity. So we'll have to maintain our relationship with DES, Department of Environment and Science, to ensure that those compliance and monitoring activities happens. Any other comments? In that case, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. So I'm voting for that. Councillor Madsen, Councillor Doyle, Councillor Fechner, Councillor Milligan and Councillor Kunzelmann have voted for it. Councillor Island, how do you vote?
Affirmative.
You vote for it. Any against? There's no against. Those abstaining? Councillor Tullow is abstaining from the vote. So it's carried. Thank you. We now move on to item 16.3, which is the acquisition of drainage easements in Tregear Street, and looks like a part of Rockton Street as well in Newtown. Does anyone have any questions of the council officers? Yes, may I have the relevant council officer to the stand, please? Thank you.
Mine's more of a technical nature.
Okay, so I'll just speak with the acting. The question is more of a technical nature as opposed to a property services.
Engineers. Maybe if we can hear what the question is first.
Yeah,
So
sorry.
I'll just say, please state your name and your position, please.
Good morning, Alicia Reed, Property Services, Senior Property Officer, Acquisitions and Disposals.
Thank you very much.
My question relates to the technical details of the issue at hand. The report makes mention of a service request in early 2019, I believe, and I just want to unpack what that means for the broader network. What are the negative impacts of the damage to this particular stormwater drainage, and how it's negatively impacting either the residents in very close proximity or the broader network of stormwater drainage.
So you're wanting to question whether the works actually need to be carried out and why? Is that the more technical question? Thank you.
I just want to understand that service request a little bit better.
Yep.
Depending on advice from Mr. Madigan, whether we defer the matter and get one of the engineers to be present. You can speak to it.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you, Ms. Ree. Mr. Madigan's coming up.
Morning, Mayor and Councillors. Sean Madigan, General Manager of Infrastructure and Environment.
Thank you. Councillor Fechner?
Certainly. So the initial service request was from a resident downstream of Tregear Street, where these works are being conducted. And it's my understanding that their property was being negatively impacted by floodwaters as a result of the failure of this particular network. That then caused us to go in with our CCTV to investigate. And we identified, as the report says. So if we fail to actually rectify this, there will be future flooding events that will negatively impact downstream residents from the property in particular.
Since that initial service request in 2019, have there been any subsequent service requests that speak to this same broader issue in the network?
Not to my knowledge, but it's my understanding the reason for that is the fact that we have been working with the resident and identifying the issue. So we had said to the residents, we identified the issue and we're working towards a solution, and this is the solution presented.
So we've been working with the resident downstream that made the initial complaint?
That's correct, yes, keeping them advised.
Keeping them advised, okay. Yep, thank you.
Any other questions of Mr Madigan? No, thank you very much, Mr Madigan. Are there any other questions we'd like to ask council officers? No. In that case, we've got recommendations A through to D. This is a report concerning the acquisition of the easements for drainage purposes. I will move that. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Doyle? Thank you. I'll open up the floor for discussion on this item. No discussion. I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the room. Councillor Ireland, how do you vote?
I agree.
Okay, thank you. It's carried. We move on to item 16.4, which is the monthly financial performance report of February 2022. And the recommendation that the report on the council's financial performance for the period ending 28th of February 2022, submitted in accordance with the local government regulations, be considered and noted by the council. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to? Actually, I'll ask. May I ask for the CFO to? Please state your name and your position.
Morning, Mayor and Councillors. Paul Mollenhauer, Acting Chief Financial Officer.
I know you've discussed the flood impacts, but I guess overall, how will the flood impact our budget?
There'll be a number of watching briefs that we'll need to keep an eye on. Obviously, these numbers are based on 28 Feb, which only includes that very first initial CDO response. If we look at costs captured to date, and bearing in mind that they're not an end-of-month number, we've accumulated or we've captured approximately $1.4 million worth of spend through the month of March in response to that initial counter-disaster operations and those initial repairs. It's anticipated that there's a large proportion of that initial response will be captured by or covered by funding from state and federal agencies in terms of their disaster response. There will be elements of that can't be captured, that will fall on council, but at the moment that initial cost will largely be covered.
Will that be tracked, so at least in the fullness of time we'll see what the impact is?
Yes. Yeah, the costing structures that are set up in behind for officers to use as they're undertaking their works are actually reasonably extensive and give us a fair degree of ability to analyse what works are occurring and at what time.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any discussions with the CFO? No, thank you very much, Ms Molyneux. I move this recommendation. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Doyle. Any discussion? There being no discussion, I'll move the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the room. Councillor Ireland, how do you vote?
Affirmative.
Thank you very much. It's carried. Move on to 16.5, which is the report in the Audit and Risk Management Committee of the 16th of February. And the recommendation is that the report of the ARMC of the 16th of February be received and the contents noted and recommendation contained therein be adopted. Does anyone have any questions of this report? No? In that case, I will move this recommendation. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman. Any discussions or questions on this? Okay. There being none, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the room. Councillor Ireland, how do you vote?
Affirmative.
Thank you very much. We now move on to some late reports, and I think people understand why they were late, but the very first one is 16.6, the Flood Assistance Package for 2022. And there are three recommendations here that recommendation A is that in accordance with local government regulations, that council decide to grant a $250 concession for general rates on the April to June 2022 rates notice to eligible ratepayers impacted by the 2022 floods. Recommendation B, that council approve the use of payment arrangements, the granting of discounts and waiving of interest until the 30th of June 2032 for eligible ratepayers. And C, that Ipswich City Council approve the waiving of fees and charges for eligible applicants impacted by the 2022 floods based on the reports that are here now. Would anyone like to ask the relevant council officers any questions? No? In that case, I'll move recommendations A through to C. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Milligan. I'll open the floor up for discussion. I think Councillor Tully.
Yeah, I'll be fairly brief, but I just want to make a general comment as well. I think this is an appropriate response to a very difficult situation, a flood that came 11 years after the last one. I may have mentioned previously, but on average since 1890, the floods on the Brisbane and Bremer River system have been 19 years apart, and that was part of the evidence that I gave to the Floods Commission of Inquiry. So even if we use a benchmark of about 20 years, we've only had 11 years between these two rather devastating floods. Can I just sort of, in a more general sense, just briefly hone in on the Goodna area, even though the flooding was less than in 2011, where there were 600 properties affected, business properties and residential properties. This time there were some 250. The flooding for those 250, of course, was similar to maybe a bit less in some cases, but once your property's flooded, even if you get half a metre of water through your residential part of a property, that's significant. And offering this particular package is a recognition that other ratepayers in the city are willing to help out in a significant time of need. And it was certainly with that in mind that I think a lot of people have received assistance in different ways. There is other assistance available through a variety of sources. But if I could just briefly just put on the record the support and assistance in our area and in other areas, no doubt, through the ADF, the Army, and RAF, the Shiloh Church. They were the first cab off the rank for a community body to assist. The Anglican Church, TEAS, Vital Chemical, Suu Kyi, Pennywise, the Orange Sky provided free washing and showers for people, Muslims for Peace. We had coffee, bread and food from a variety of sources, and the Kerwick Hotel, and of course the recovery staff at the recovery centre, some through the Salvation Army, certainly the state and federal agencies. That's been a real godsend for a community working together through that time. So I'm fully supportive of this particular recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Tully. Anyone else wish to speak to this? I just want to reiterate that obviously, Council, we have certain modelling of where we know where the floods went, and we'll be applying this rebate automatically. If you find that you were flooded and it's not covered that, please contact Council. There are provisions in there for Council officers to assist you there. The same with the arrangements, as well as the general rates concession and everything else here. And I think in particular, and I thank Councillor Tully and Councillor Ireland for their advice. Certainly, we're looking at the commercial and business licensing fees and charges as well, just looking at the lessons from 2011 and 2013 of some really practical things that we can as a council to assist our residents who've had this dreadful thing happen to them. If there's nothing else, I'll put the recommendations A through to C to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the room. Councillor Ireland, how do you vote?
Affirmative.
Thank you very much. We'll now go on to the next late report, which is the procurement. provision of a detailed design services for the Commonwealth Hotel extension. Now that there's a lease in place, oh, sorry, I apologise, I won't. Thank you. This is a report concerning the requirement for council to obtain 100% detailed design for the Commonwealth Hotel extension to ascertain an indicative cost structure for the construction works associated with the approved works. And this report is seeking council resolution to utilise exception section 235B of the local government regulations to engage Hutchinson's for provision of the prescribed services as detailed above. And you've got the two recommendations there for a contractual arrangement of $280,000 and $280 and $79. Would anyone like to ask the relevant council officers any questions on this matter?
I would like to ask a question on a recommendation. Is now the time? Or
Yeah, well, I'll ask the relevant council officer to the lectern. I'll let you know, Councillor Island, when they're at the lectern.
Okay.
So Mr. White's making his way.
Richard White, Manager of Procurement.
Thank you, Councillor Island. Would you like to ask you a question?
Mr. White, on recommendation B, I just want to know, is that money coming out of the money that we previously have approved for further work, or is this on top of money that we've already approved?
It's within the money that's already been approved.
Okay, thank you.
Just following on from that, the reason why it's coming to us is not because of the budget amount, it's because it's sole source. Would that be correct?
100% correct. So the local government regulations require that over $200,000 we approach the market in an open and transparent way. This is the transparency that we're doing through this public council meeting, as detailed in the report. Okay. Huge amount of latent conditions on this site. When we were developing the AFL, at one point there was discussions about them doing the design, but even they said,
yep. Thank you.
Yeah, too hard.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. White. Are there any other questions of council officers? I'll move all the recommendations. Oh, sorry, they've already. Oh, sorry. I move all the recommendations. Do I have a seconder to that, Councillor Doyle? I guess in discussion, just reiterating the point raised by Councillor Island, this is not a change to the budget. It's just a matter of how it's being spent. Any other discussion around the chamber? None. So I'll put the matter to the vote. I'll put all the recommendations to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the chamber. Councillor Island, how do you vote?
Affirmative.
Thank you. It's carried. I'll wait for Councillor Manson to arrive. Thank you. We now move on to item 16.8, which is the employment contract variation, which is a report concerning the variation of the employment contract of the CEO. And there were two recommendations there, that council approve the variation to the CEO's employment contract and that the mayor be authorised to execute the employment contract variation on behalf of council. Would anyone like to ask the relevant council officers any questions on this?
I would, but I think it'd be appropriate that we move into a closed session.
Would you like to move that?
And I'll move that under Section 254J3B of the Local Government Act, that's industrial matters affecting employees, that we move into a closed session.
Thank you. That's been put to the floor. All those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the chamber. Sorry, was your hand up, Councillor Kunzelman? It was. Thank you. Councillor Island, how do you vote?
Affirmative.
Thank you very much. We will now go into closed session. Harrison, let me know when we are in closed session. We're live now. Thank you very much. We've just come out of closed session where was matters of staffing confidence and so on were discussed. I will move recommendations A and B. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Fechner. Any discussion? There being no discussion, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the room. Councillor Ireland, how do you vote?
Affirmative.
Thank you. So it's passed and carried. We now move on to the notices of motion. And 17.1 is the notice of motion for a water reservoir at 4 Madsen Close, Eastern Heights. I'll hand over to the mover of that motion.
Thank you, Mayor. My notice of motion is as follows. A, that Council write to Urban Utilities advising that the water reservoir at 4 Madsen Close, Eastern Heights has been identified for inclusion as a structure of heritage significance in the draft Ipswich planning scheme. B, that Council requests from Urban Utilities any heritage assessments or other documentation relating to the water reservoir. C, that Council's Planning and Regulatory Services Department prepare a report that considers the heritage and historic significance of the water reservoir, and that this report be presented to the April Growth, Infrastructure and Waste Committee meeting. And finally, D, that the Council investigate and consider making an application to the Queensland Heritage Council for the asset to be included on the State Register.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Thank you, Councillor Fechner. I'll hand over to yourself, Councillor Doyle.
Thank you, Mayor. It is estimated that the reservoir at 4 Madsen Close, Eastern Heights, is to be over 80 years old, built approximately in the 1940s to help with water pressure demands in Eastern Heights. Approximately 10 years ago it was decommissioned, and the owners of the asset, Urban Utilities, last year confirmed their intention to move forward with plans to demolish the asset. No matter your affection or connection to the tower, or as the case may be not, what isn't in dispute is that it's a very identifiable structure or marker on Ipswich's skyline. The Queensland Government places great value on our state's unique and diverse cultural heritage and is committed to protecting heritage places of both state and local significance. As a recent appointee to the Queensland Heritage Council, I'm acutely aware that local governments are recognised as key partners in conserving Queensland's cultural heritage. We owe it to both our future generations to conserve the heritage places that define Ipswich's history. As our population is predicted to soar in the coming years and new development follows, as a city, the onus is on us to avoid the potential loss of important aspects of our heritage. Heritage places strengthen our communities. They are reference points that are testimony to a community's story and help to distinguish its character. The historical markers help shape a community's social, economic and cultural potential. Conserving these heritage places shows us we are proud of our heritage. These places have associated stories and some evoke special meaning for us as individuals and as members of the Ipswich community, who we are and where we came from. These heritage places represent part of our common inheritance. We have a duty to, I'm of the opinion we have a duty to ensure they are conserved and celebrated by our children and their descendants. And it's for this reason that I bring my notice of motion today.
Thank you very much. As a seconder, Councillor Fechner, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks to Councillor Doyle for bringing this to Council this morning. I am in favour of the recommendations in front of us. I think this is worth investigating at the very least. There have been some misunderstandings along the way with regards to communications between Urban Utilities and Ipswich City Council, and that goes both ways. So this notice of motion goes away to getting the correct information in front of this group so that we can consider its significance to our city moving forward with all of the relevant information at hand. So thank you, Councillor Doyle, for this.
Thank you, Councillor Fechner. I think it's a very, I'll be supporting this notice of motion. I think it's really important to share that information with residents. I do have to ask, Councillor Madsen, is it named after your family or is it no connection? Ford Madsen Close.
It's named after my nana. I can report to the meeting that it was named after her because Australia Post employees refused to deliver letters up that hill, so they would instead put them in my nana's letterbox further along on Chermside Road. So she'd walk them up every day. It's pretty appalling to see that Australia Post has further declined in their delivery standards in Ipswich. I also wanted to make some comment today in regards to some sort of secondary issues that flow off the back of this. If the site in question no longer serves a purpose for water infrastructure, I think it should be investigated as to whether urban utilities should continue to own it. And I would foreshadow that potentially the revenue that they receive for the mobile phone tower site that is adjacent could potentially be used to fund the maintenance of the site. And I would further say that I think it would be good to consider aspects of the site in respect to the former council employees who for many years played a key role in the growth and development of Ipswich through the delivery of municipal water infrastructure. I met a member of the former Ipswich Water volunteering in some flood cleanups, and he still staunchly believes that Ipswich Water was better. I may or may not fall into that category. I think some of my colleagues have an idea there. But, you know, it was a council asset for most of its history, and it was council workers ensuring that people had access to water in Ipswich. And I think that that's pretty cool.
Thank you very much, Councillor Madsen. I didn't know that. Thank you. Are there issues?
Mayor, I would support Councillor Madsen asking for urban utilities to consider owning it so that we get somebody else to maintain it.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion? So I'm just checking here because there's a disruption in the meeting. Councillor Kunzelman, may I ask? Councillor Kunzelman, may I ask what's the disruption? Okay. Has it been fixed? Do you wish to adjourn to fix it, or? No? Happy to. Any other discussion on this notice of motion? I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the room. Councillor Ireland?
Affirmative.
Thank you. It's carried. Thank you. Next is notice of motion, amendment of meeting procedures policy put forward by Councillor Tully at the last meeting. Councillor Tully, would you like to speak to it? Or
I'll formally move that motion. It stands in my name.
Thank you very much. Is there a seconder to the motion? Thank you, Councillor Million. Or Fechner. Thank you, Councillor Fechner. Any discussion? Oh, I'll get you to move that.
Yeah, just very briefly, the key element of this is to bring the wording of our meeting procedures policy in line with the Local Government Act. Local Government Regulation 262 provides that a motion for the amendment or repeal of a motion, which is not all motions, but certainly can be a significant number, needs to be provided 5 days, at least 5 days, before the relevant council meeting. Our current procedure refers to 5 days before the notice of motion of the particular meeting. So this would bring that in line. It's certainly an adequate time for it to be advised to all councillors and to be on the agenda. So it just brings those two in parallel and not in conflict.
Thank you. Councillor Fechner, the seconder, you wish to speak to this one?
Yeah, I echo the sentiments of Councillor Tully.
Yep. I'll just refer to the Acting CEO. Any issues with implementing this particular policy?
Through you, Mayor, obviously the step of removing the CEO's discretion as to whether something is operational, an operational matter or not, means that there will be more matters being presented to council that may have not needed to come to council. If the notice of motion was of an operational nature, then it could have been dealt with by either a request from the CEO to action that request on behalf of the council or not. But if that's the will of the council, then that's the way the policy will be implemented going forward.
I think that's staying in, isn't it, Councillor Tully? That particular
No, that last
913.
Sorry, no, that's one of the critical issues that in the current wording of the policy, the CEO can determine that it can be dealt with by another committee or ordinary meeting, and also it could be dealt with as an operational procedure. As I've said on many occasions, operational matters are within the purview of the council, but more importantly, no councillor should be denied the right, in my view, to put up a motion, and it's up to either the committee or the council meeting to decide the appropriate course of action. And if that's a referral to the CEO to pursue the matter, that's fine. But this enables and frees a councillor in putting forward any motion to this council without the CEO, and I'm not personalising this, and any CEO being able to say they're not going to put it to the council meeting because it could be dealt with in operational procedures. That should be a matter for the committee or the relevant council meeting to determine.
So are you, just in reading through this previously, so the current policy 9.1.3, are you suggesting that that is removed completely?
No.
That didn't come through.
Yes.
That's the last dot point.
Yeah.
Okay.
On the motion before the council, Part B says that
Yep, I got it.
that 9.1.3 be renumbered 9.1.2 and deleting just the last dot. Just the last dot point under that paragraph.
I guess my only comment is that I encourage councillors to, if they can action something with an information request, to utilise that. It's simple, it's easy. Under the Act, the organisation has to respond to us within 10 working days. So I'd encourage, for good order of meetings, to keep things at the right level. It would be good for us as councillors to make sure that we do use that provision, because I think the only things that have been knocked back have been based on councillors asking for information, which could have been gained via an information request. I'll get to you guys later. So that's my understanding from what I've seen. What has been, I think there's only been 2 things that have been knocked back. I think Councillor Madsen, you wish to speak?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm supportive of the motion. I think it further entrenches the view that all councillors have a democratic right to bring a matter before the council chamber, before a live stream, and may they be heard if they choose to be heard in the chamber.
Thank you, Councillor Madsen.
Just a point of clarification, Mayor. You said just moments ago to things that we knocked back, or did you mean that the CEO has knocked back?
I should say, not myself. Sorry, I went we, the royal we for the organisation.
Yeah, so that the CEO. Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? No. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Sorry, my apologies. My apologies.
I endorse what you're saying, Mayor, and this is not intended to, to have dozens of motions on operational issues every meeting, but I think it's a fundamental principle, and I endorse what's just been said by Councillor Madsen, that councillors should have the right to do that. But more importantly, that 5 days means at the moment, 5 days before the notice of motion is something like, I don't know, 10 days before the meeting, whereas this brings everything back into harmony with the regulation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the room. Councillor Ireland, how do you vote?
Affirmative.
Thank you. We go to item 17.3, and before we go to that, I'll let you know that I've contacted the Department of State Development, Infrastructure, Local Government and Planning regarding item 17.3. Our council has not dealt with a notice of motion for an apology before, and I wanted to ensure that our council proceeded with this matter fairly and in accordance with the Local Government Act and local government regulations and our council policies. I was also concerned that the councillors here who are making a decision would receive conflicting evidence and sought a way to assist them in their decision making. And I was informed of the following by the legal department of the department, and that is that any notice of motion for any councillor to make an apology is unenforceable. This chamber cannot force any councillor to make an apology The only body that can do that is the Councillor Conduct Tribunal. Based on this advice, I will utilise paragraph 11.1.1 of the Council's meeting procedure policy, which states, if at a meeting the chairperson or councillor considers that a matter or a notice before a meeting is of an objectionable nature or outside the powers of the local government, and I'll just reiterate that one, outside the powers
I've just got a
of the
point
local
of order,
government.
Mayor.
Yes?
I believe that you have a conflict of interest in this matter and that it needs to be disclosed to this meeting, and this meeting could determine whether or not you can proceed with those determinations given that conflict.
Okay, would you like to put something forward then?
Well, I have.
Under what? I guess I'll ask the acting CEO that. I can't see, it does say quite clearly in the matter that the chairperson is able to, has the, it does, if I could just complete the section, the paragraph. That if it's outside the powers of the local government, the chairperson may, on the chairperson's own volition or at the request of another councillor, declare that the matter not be considered further. As this matter is unenforceable by a council, it's only enforceable by the Councillor Conduct Tribunal. Therefore, it's outside the powers of the local government, so I declare that this matter not be considered further and move on to the next item, which is, are there any other notices or motions for the next month's meeting?
Well, Mayor, you've invited me to identify the provision, and in accordance with Section 150 EW of the Local Government Act 2009, I reasonably believe that you have a prescribed, declarable conflict of interest in this item. And depending upon whether or not you accept that, and can I just say that notwithstanding the powers of a chair, that doesn't prevent you from having a conflict in a matter. And now that the matter's been raised, it needs to be dealt with in relation to the conflict of interest provisions of the Act.
Okay. I'll just double check that by my understanding, which case, if that's legal. Okay. In that case, I would like to deal with it by actually leaving the room and letting the room decide whether I have a conflict or not.
Before you go, Mayor, in the absence of the Deputy Mayor, we need to have a vote with respect to who can chair the meeting in the floor council.
Previous Deputy Mayor? Am I allowed to vote on that or nominate? Probably not. Probably not.
Councillors, can I ask for someone to nominate?
I move that Councillor Russell Milligan assume the chair position for the matter of this vote.
Second. All those in favour? Motion's carried. Oh, sorry. Motion's carried in the room on the vote of Councillor Madsen, Beckner and Kunzelmann. Councillor Ireland, how do you vote? For Councillor Milligan to take the chair?
I'm affirmative.
That motion's passed. Councillor Milligan, would you like to come forward and take the chair or take it from there? Sorry.
I'll be recorded as abstaining from that vote.
I thought we had some discussion.
I think you'll see he's very reluctant.
So the matter before us is whether we or the councillors are of the view that the Mayor has a conflict of interest in this matter. Is that correct, Councillor Tully?
Yes, that's the proposal that I'm putting forward, but then I think it would need to determine that what the... I find these documents a little bit inconclusive about what the next procedure is, but it would be, if there is a conflict of interest, normally to, one option would be to, not on this motion, but separately on that motion, if it were to be carried, that she not participate in any final decision.
That could be an outcome.
Thank you, CEO. I'll take it from here. Councillor Tully, so you have put that Mayor Harding has a conflict with regard to the matter?
Yeah, this motion.
That's the motion?
Yeah, and be determined that she not participate in any consideration of that motion.
Okay. Is there a seconder? Do I need to take a seconder for that one? Or is that a proceeding?
Can perhaps for one second.
I can second it.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Ireland. I'll open the matter for discussion. Councillor Tully?
Yeah, I might say that I think, to my mind, that it's quite clear that there's a conflict of interest in the matter, and that the appropriate way to have dealt with this, because it's a notice of motion before the council, which hadn't actually been moved or seconded before the council. And those issues that have been raised by the Mayor are quite legitimate for this council to consider in the consideration of the primary motion. There probably is a way in which an amendment to that motion could be could facilitate the proper consideration of it. In my view, it should have proceeded in a different manner, and that is calling for a mover and a seconder, and then any advice or suggestion about it. But because the Mayor is intimately involved in the outcome of this motion, that's why I've put this motion forward. And I would foreshadow that if the motion is carried, that then my proposal would be that the matter of the actual notice of motion be deferred until the April ordinary council meeting for proper consideration by the original proposer.
Okay.
Sorry, Councillor Tully, your mic doesn't seem to work all the time.
Just very briefly, if this motion is carried, my suggestion would then be in the open meeting to so that the original proposer, who's the Deputy Mayor, who's not here, that the matter be deferred until the April ordinary council meeting. And that will certainly give us all of the opportunity to canvass the advice that's been preliminarily provided.
So my understanding, Councillor Tully, is that we have a motion by yourself that Mayor Harding does have a declarable conflict of interest in the matter because it directly affects Mayor Harding. And so that's the motion on the floor at the moment, and you have also foreshadowed.
There's an addition that the declarable interest and that she not participate in the consideration of the primary matter.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll correct that in that. Beg your pardon, Councillor Gunzman, I couldn't see you. You have to turn your microphone on and speak through the...
I believe with that motion that we still have Mayor, the way that's written, we still have Mayor Harding in the room.
Not participated.
Don't we?
Attend but not participate is another.
Will she excuse herself?
Yeah, but that's on this motion, not on the primary motion.
Through the chair, I don't believe the Mayor did need to leave the room while the conflict was determined, but she's already done so. But I believe she's only left the room for the conflict vote, and then that would rule on whether or not she'll be present for a vote on the original matter. Is that correct?
Yes,
that's what we're talking about.
That makes sense.
The councillor agrees they have a prescribed or declarable conflict of interest, and then there's a course of action that needs to be taken. But if that councillor disagrees, they're required to inform the meeting as to the reasons for this belief. So are we assuming by her actions that she believes she does have a conflict of interest and has therefore chosen to leave the room? What can reasonably be deduced from the actions here in the meeting without any words from the councillor? I don't, I'm unsure how to move forward on that.
Well, we need to separate the two issues. The Mayor voluntarily is not in the room at the moment. And what we can then, what we're basically determining in relation to the notice of motion, which is not yet a motion before the council, I'll make that point. It's a notice of motion which hasn't yet been moved or seconded, and how we deal with that.
Can I just weigh it in? Given that the proposed notice of motion is by a councillor who is absent today, is there no reason why she couldn't present a new notice of motion at the next meeting if she decides to, if the matter's not resolved, and we don't need to deal with it today?
Well, I guess we do need to deal with it in some manner, either deferring it until that meeting.
Well, it was my understanding under the meeting procedures it didn't need to be deferred, laid on the table. There is provisions within the meeting procedures
to do what?
To move to the next item, which is no more matters.
Well, that was put to us by the Mayor, but we don't have a motion before the council yet. There is no motion before us yet. That there's a proposed motion which is not yet moved or seconded.
Yeah. So what I'm suggesting is, if the notice of motion is so important to that councillor will raise it for the next meeting.
Is there, does any councillor wish to
One
make
moment.
any suggestion for an amendment to the motion that is currently on the floor?
Chair, if I may, I think where it gets a bit interesting is when a conflict of interest matter is declared. Do we not have to determine that first and foremost prior to any amendment?
That's what the motion currently before the chamber is. I'll continue, allow continuation of discussion on the motion, but discussion on any item outside of that needs to be handled by at another time. So is there any further discussion with regards to the motion that is put and seconded?
Just in relation to what I was foreshadowing, that if we did want to deal with it in some way, another motion could be simply that just lie on the table, the notice of motion. There's still no mover or seconder to that motion, just lie on the table.
Now, Councillor Tully, I understand that...
We don't need a ruling in relation to that from the Chair.
Do we need to firm up the wording with regards
Yes, because it's listed as foreshadowed.
Do we need to... It's dealing with the conflict of interest here in accordance with section... Do we just need
150 EU.
Oh, you've got it. Thank you. Sorry. Thank you.
Councillor Madsen.
And it is related to the discussion. The matter in general, does our decision-making process benefit from Mayor Harding being able to speak to that matter, or is our decision-making process hindered? I can't make that decision that quickly. I don't have any case to refer it to, but it does make sense if it's a matter that intimately involves someone, that they may give evidence or something. It seems like a quasi-judicial thing, and yeah, I don't have much clarity on that.
Through the chair, that the Mayor has made a decision to leave the room as a conflict of interest. So in terms of the substantive matter before you, you're deciding whether you agree with that position and what action to take, whether she stays in the meeting or not. So I don't think her coming back can add to the debate. Simply you have to make a decision about whether you agree with Councillor Tully's motion that she has a conflict.
I was actually discussing whether or not it's pertinent for the Mayor to be involved or present for the motion that the conflict's been declared in.
Can I just clarify another issue that and it is a little confusing, including me. If she has left the room, believing there's a conflict, does that mean that we can deal with the substantive matter? Yeah, given that I think your wording was that she appears to have accepted there is a conflict.
Involuntarily left the meeting.
So I'll just run conversation through the chair, with all due respect, CEO. So the question, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that due to the fact that Mayor Harding has, of her own choice, decided to leave the meeting room due to conflict of interest, then there is no need for the council to vote as to whether she does or does not have a conflict.
That's the question I've raised.
Whilst she is out of the room for that purpose, the substantive motion, a notice of motion, can be dealt with. Does anyone wish to agree or correct that?
Yeah, I think that's correct.
You agree that's correct, Councillor Tully? Therefore, Councillor Kunzman?
Because of what's gone on, are you saying that we don't need to vote on the conflict?
That is correct, because Mayor Harding,
And in
by
fact, that
her
is
own
in fact
choice-
covered by the regulations, isn't it?
Sorry?
That is covered by the regulation, that a person can declare that interest and leave the room,
Yes.
and therefore there's no further decision required from the rest of us.
In accordance with 150 ES, as
Yes.
a result of my conflict of interest, I will now leave the room.
That's right, yeah.
We assume that that's the provisions under which the mayor has.
She did not actually say that, but her action has been to leave the room.
Through you, Chair, I was just about to say the same thing as Councillor Kunzman. She didn't actually quote the sections of the Act in saying that. She did it out of her standing good meeting practice not to be involved in. She didn't take the stance of I hereby declare that, because the Councillor Tully raised the motion or proposed motion to seek the direction of the meeting. So I still believe that decision has to be, that motion has to be put and decided upon.
All right, well, I'll accept that advice.
It's been moved and seconded, so.
It has been moved and seconded that.
So, if I could clarify, the motion is...
I'll just finish what I was saying, Councillor Kunzman.
Yep.
Once I've found the correct wordage, you could just highlight that, please. Yes, if we could just go back to the motion. The conflict motion. So it was moved by Councillor Tully and seconded by Councillor Ireland that Mayor Harding does have a declarable conflict of interest in the matter because it directly affects Mayor Harding. I believe we've done the rounds of discussion. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Councillor Ireland, how do you vote?
Affirmative.
Those against? Councillor Doyle, you abstain? The motion is carried.
Councillor Milligan, can I seek an adjournment, please, or permission to
Sorry, Councillor Doyle,
break.
I just can't pick you up.
Councillor Ireland, Councillor Doyle has asked for an adjournment.
Okay.
Or alternatively, permission to leave chambers, please.
Okay. Which do you prefer, Councillor Doyle?
I need to go to the ladies.
If I may, Chair, we can have an adjournment, but we just need to agree on a time.
Sure.
And then put it to a vote.
So I'll just need a clear motion for adjournment for a specified time. Councillor Doyle, would you like to adjourn for 15 minutes until midday? Yes? No? Oh, Councillor Kunzman? I'll run the meeting from the chair, thanks. It doesn't need to be seconded. Those in favour? It's unanimous. Sorry, Councillor Ireland, how do you vote?
Affirmative. Yep,
It's unanimous,
affirmative.
carried. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We've returned from adjournment. All councillors are present except for Councillor Doyle. And Councillor Ireland is online.
I am.
So we'll resume. I'll vacate the chair and invite Mayor Harding to take the meeting forward from here.
If I may I please get an update of what happened, because from my perspective, I made a decision in regards to what was happening, for instance, and invoked paragraph 11.11 of the Council's meeting procedure policy. Therefore, we weren't going to be dealing with 17.3. And then there was a discussion about the conflict of interest, so I've left while they voted. So from what I could see, the discussion was on whether I had a conflict which on 17.3, which I'd already made a ruling on.
No, I raised a point of order.
Yeah.
I raised a point of order in relation to the conflict, but also, given that the conflict was there, whether it was competent for you to make that ruling effectively. Because if there is a conflict, you don't have the power to make that ruling.
I guess I'll ask the CEO a question. From the discussion I saw from outside, I didn't see paragraph 11.1.1 being discussed. I saw the motion 17.3 be discussed, but I'm happy to stand corrected.
No, that's correct, Mayor. The discussion in the chamber was with regard to whether you had a conflict or not and how the council was going to respond to that. Simply because, as Councillor Tully said, he'd raised the point of order, the question about the conflict of interest, and so that, for all intents, stopped the conversation or the discussion around the motion that you were endeavouring to put or in the process of putting. And so that has, for all intents and purposes, has lapsed. It's not on the books. We've got the resolution on the books from the conflict of interest matter, and then we now progress to the next item, or to finish the item on the agenda in terms of 17.3, the apology.
Right. May I just seek a clarification? I didn't have a motion put up. I pointed out a maintenance of good order under our meeting procedures policy, and I don't see how that could be it.
Well, yeah, but
it doesn't say here that it could be overridden.
Yeah,
it's quite clear that it's at my own volition. But anyway,
my view was that if there is a conflict, which the council has agreed that there is, that entire matter precludes you from dealing with that. And given that 17.3, in my view, is still before us, I'll move that the matter lie on the table.
Okay.
I don't believe that requires a seconder.
Lie the matter on the table till, do you have a time or anything like that?
Well, I'll put in there until the April ordinary meeting.
April ordinary. Thank you. Would anyone like to speak to that? No? In that case, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you very much. I'll raise it as well. So I see
I don't think you're permitted to vote.
I'm not allowed. Well, may I ask, how can I chair if am I conflicted out? If I'm conflicted out, I shouldn't be able to chair. So I'm a bit confused here.
That's your decision.
Well, no, I was asked to come back into chair. Yeah. I deliberately left the room, so I didn't want anyone to feel pressure. I wanted people to make their own decision. I voluntarily left, and then I was asked to come back to chair this.
So, Mayor, from my perspective, that it's the matter is a procedural matter in terms of laying the item on the table. I see no problem in that decision. You participating in that decision. It's not a substantive matter at hand. So that's.
I'll accept.
Okay, thank you. I'll call the vote again to lay the matter on the table to the April Council meeting, and I see it's unanimous in the room. Councillor Ireland, how do you vote?
Affirmative.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Thank you. I'll now move on. Obviously, that we're still at the item 17, which is the notices of motion, and to see if anyone has any notice of motion. I have one that I'd like for us to consider that I will put forward at the next meeting, and that is for our council to conduct a review of the flood. We just recently had our elected reps working group meeting, and I'll be putting forward a notion of motion for how our council will conduct a review of the flood, and to make sure it includes feedback and consultation from residents as well. Are there any other notices of motions people would like to raise at a future meeting? Yes, Councillor.
Mayor, I don't have a notice of motion for a future meeting, but I've emailed everyone. I'd like to move that we suspend standing orders.
Yes.
So that we can urgently consider a matter to defer the start time of our next meeting to allow councillors to attend some Anzac services across the city.
Thank you. I'll put that matter to the vote. Those in favour of suspending standing orders. It's unanimous in the room. Councillor Ireland, do you agree or not?
Affirmative.
Thank you. It's unanimous and carried. Thank you very much. Would you like to?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll refer everyone to the email that I've just sent to you all about 3-4 minutes ago. I'd sent it at that point in time so that it was at the top of your inbox. Just seeking a simple motion today that says that the meeting start time for the ordinary council meeting for 21 April 2022 be moved from 9 a.m. to 12 noon to allow councillors to attend and represent council at Anzac Day services at schools across the city.
Thank you. And I seek a second from Councillor Fechner. Thank you. Do you wish to speak any further on the matter, Councillor Manson?
I just wanted to apologise to Councillor Milligan if I didn't get the capitalisation correct on Anzac. He talked to me about it last week, and I was urgently looking through a couple of things this morning to get that right. I'm not confident I did. I found unclear information on a few department websites, and I'm looking for Councillor Tully's feedback if he's happy with 12 noon. Yeah, well, I also did a little bit of research because 12 p.m. is typically refers to noon and 12 a.m. refers to midnight, but sometimes that creeps in a bit of confusion. So I don't intend to be ridiculous this morning, but open to any clarification on those two matters.
Thank you very much. I think it's quite clear that you're referring that the meeting starts 3 hours later. Thank you very much. The seconder of that motion was you, Councillor Fechner. Would you like to speak to this as well? Thank you. Any discussion? Thank you, Councillor Milligan.
Thank you, Mayor. I totally agree with the mover and seconder that it being the one day of the year, which is there should be exceptional consideration for attendance by councillors and Mayor to various events to support our primary schools and high school within their divisional areas and across the city, and that it is clear and obvious the way forward. Noon being standard lunchtime, would we commence at lunchtime?
That is the motion before us. Thank you, Councillor Milligan. 12 noon. Thank you. Any other discussion? I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous. In the chamber, Councillor Ireland?
Affirmative.
Thank you. We'll now, I'll move a motion to resume standing orders. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the room. Councillor Ireland?
Affirmative.
Thank you very much. We now, are there any other, no, I'll move on to questions on notice. Are there any questions on notice?
I have a question on notice, please.
Yes.
I'm not sure we've had one in the last 2 years.
I don't think we have.
There are 3 succinct questions, but there's about 4 lines of explaining what the questions are about.
Okay.
And I have a copy for the committee clerk. This is a question on notice to the CEO. The historic 2011 flood level at Goodna was 16.5 metres AHD, as identified in the Brisbane Strategic Floodplain Management Plan, applicable to Brisbane and Ipswich and utilised by the Ipswich City Council. Whereas the Supreme Court of New South Wales in the 2011 flood class action was persuaded to accept a height of 16.91 metres AHD as the appropriate level. Was the 16.5 metre AHD level at Goodna in 2011 surveyed or otherwise confirmed by or on behalf of the Ipswich City Council? What data exists to confirm its accuracy? And is there any data showing that the 16.91 metre AHD level is correct or more likely to be correct?
Thank you very much for those questions on notice. Any other questions on notice? Thank you. I'll close the meeting at 12 p.m. and thank you very much.